So, let me once again welcome you to Presentation Excellence's Wednesday webinars. You're part of a series of 7 webinars that we're going to be doing this spring to help you advance your career, close more deals, and help improve people's lives. Today's topic, as I mentioned, is Present Like a Pro, deliver compelling face-to-face presentations and webinars. And let us begin. As I've said to you, because it's a webinar, I try to interact with you and let you ask questions if you have any. And as you can see from the screen, you're able to ask any questions that you have. We'll try to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. So please feel free throughout the entire presentation to ask the question. And with that, and housekeeping now aside, let us begin. First question I always like to start off with the topic is, why is it important? Life's full of presentations, and yet very few of us have gone to school or actually gone to a professional educational program where we've learned how to do great presentations. The key part that you have to understand with presentations is that they enable audiences to make better decisions. That's the reason people do it. You may be selling something, you may be marketing to them, you may be educating them so they can make better decisions. But the key is you're helping an audience make a better decision, and that's why you're having this conversation or presentation with them. The problem for most of us is most people don't want to give a presentation. In fact, many years ago, Mike Klepper wrote a book called I'd Rather Die Than Give a Speech. And what he discovered, as you can see from the statistics, is that people would even rather have a cavity filled. And I know some people who've been really paranoid about never ever going to a doctor, for a dentist rather, because they're afraid of the pain. If you're a Jerry Seinfeld fan, you probably remember he dealt with this in one of his skits as well. He said that in an average funeral, more people would rather be in the box than give the eulogy. So if you're a little nervous about giving presentations from a public speaking point of view, don't feel bad. You're in the overwhelming majority. Over 90% of people are a little shy and a little embarrassed, according to Phil Zimbardo, a psychologist from California, and so you have good company. But I think one of the real issues, which is why people feel that way about it, is that they've been in many presentations and they have found them to be boring or putting them to sleep. In fact, it was so important, this fact, that the Wall Street Journal made this a page 1 article almost 15 years ago, and it really hasn't changed. People don't like to necessarily give presentations because they're self-conscious, but they also have sat in many of them and have found them to be very boring or putting them to sleep, and that's not what we want to do. And that's why I welcome you all today for joining us in this presentation, so that everyone you do will be stimulating and exciting to people. I'm going to focus on 5 main goals with you today, what we call the 5 S's, and that is substance, what's important now, versus what's distractive clutter. Unfortunately, many people aren't able to differentiate. As I said, welcome to today's presentation, the first of our 2011 spring series, Present Like a Pro. Our focus today is to help you deliver compelling face-to-face presentations and webinars. Thank you for participating in our polling a few minutes ago. So I have a good understanding that many of you produce many presentations per month and per quarter, and that you're increasingly doing both face-to-face and webinars, and that's the reason we chose today's topic and that focus in doing the presentations. The reason this is such an important topic is in business today, we're constantly making presentations. It might be an investor presentation, a sales, a marketing presentation, both externally or internally. It might be something focused on educating our staff on what they can do or should do. It might be offering them new policies and benefits, for example, in HR, talking about some of the new procedures, 401k plans, etc. It's full of presentations. And what we're really doing is trying to help people improve their lives by making better decisions. The problem for most of us is most people don't want to give a presentation. They are embarrassed, they're self-conscious, etc. And if you're one of them, well, let me tell you something. You are part of the majority. Phil Zimbardo did a study many years ago finding 86% of all people felt they were the only ones who were shy. So you can see we're all in good company. In fact, Mike Klepper many years ago did a book, I'd Rather Die Than Give a Speech. And what he discovered is people, and many people, hate going to a dentist. Even 45% of them would rather have a cavity filled than give a speech. If you're a Jerry Seinfeld fan, you probably saw the same thing in one of his skits where he said at an average funeral, people would rather die than give the speech. So don't feel bad about the fact that you feel this way. It's common. I think one of the reasons people are so shy about giving speeches is we have been victims of boring speeches. In fact, the Wall Street Journal put together a front page article once on a study in which it interviewed 200 large company vice presidents and found that over 80% described formal talks as putting them to sleep or boring. And if you think about the platinum rule, don't do unto others as you wouldn't want them to do unto you, that's one of the problems. They're afraid maybe they're going to bore people just like they've been bored, and that's why they're hesitant to make great presentations. But the fact is, if you learn the principles we're going to go through today about how to think, plan, and design a great presentation, you can be part of that stimulating team, and that's our goal. So maybe before only 3% did it, but as we do this presentation today, you will be part of that growing percentage of people with great presentations. Our goal today, therefore, is to help you understand what we call the 5 S's, the 5 things that we find critical to great presentations. First is substance. What's important now? What should you include in the presentation as opposed to leave out because it's distractive clutter? And that's a very important part. That's why we call it a winning presentation. Just has the right information in it. That's what you should be focusing in on. The second is structure. Remember, as I mentioned before, the point of a presentation is to help guide decision making. And that's the question. Does your structure facilitate that? Is it engaging? Is it exciting? Is it nice to look at, nice to listen to, the tempo proper? How does the setting affect the impact? This is a very important element. Imagine you're presenting in a giant conference room, or you're presenting one-on-one across 2 chairs. Each of those settings has a different communication about the importance, the timing, the relationship of the speakers. And so you want to make sure you've taken that into account. And finally, it's your own speaking skills. Are you passionate about your topic, or are you just repeating information someone else gave you that's boring? How does your tempo, your speech, your body language communicate? Is it communicating trust? Is it communicating something which is authentic for you, or is it something that's not like that? So if you focus on producing 5 S's, these 5 S's well, just include what's important now. Guide decision-making, make it interesting and engaging. Take into account the impact of the situation so that you can maximize it, face-to-face versus webinar, for example, and you speak with trust, authority, and passion, you will be a great presenter. And that's our goal today. So with that, let's turn to our agenda. And there's 5 strategies really for producing effective presentations. The concept of focus, the concept that less is more, the use of visual metaphors to help the audience understand what you're saying, how you organize it for impact, and finally, the speaking element, both face-to-face or webinar, which lets you produce a winning presentation. So let's begin with the concept of focus. I do lots of presentations, and I think this has always been one of my favorite slides because it says so well what's so important, and that is you can have one and only one real goal of a presentation. Imagine this archer trying to hit 2 of our targets. He wants to inform you about something new, a new HR plan, a new health plan that you have, and at the same time he's trying to persuade you to use it. Well, in all probability, that arrow is going to miss both of those targets and never get a bullseye. But if he understands that it's a 2-step process, first might be to educate you what your options are, and then persuade you to take them that make the most sense for you. Each is a separate presentation, and each one then makes it possible for you to take that arrow and score the bullseye. And so the goal is focus. Understand what is the goal of your presentation today and only aim at doing that. The second is to recognize that in any presentation, like a book, like the Bible, 5 books in the Bible, there are different sections, and each one has a different focus. Just like Genesis talks about the creation of the world, and the Exodus is the the Hebrews leaving Egypt, similarly, each presentation is a different chapter of the story and should be uniquely pointed to the particular focus that you're trying to have. So, for example, we do lots of investor presentations for our clients, and when we do them, we might use an approach like this, a 30-second quick overview. What is this company? So you mentioned that you're a healthcare investor, and you want to find out the opportunity that we're offering you and the reality of the situation is this isn't a straight healthcare company, it's a medical products company. Is it right or wrong for you? That's the question. The second is the product line, okay? We might now say, okay, we are talking about the right kind of company, so let's tell you now some in-depth so you can see whether this is a good investment. So we talk about the product line, where it is, where it stands in relationship to its competitors, etc. We tell you about who uses it, because the customers that tend to use it or will use it in the future. And then we focus mostly on the strategy for the future. Remember, in an investor world, nobody buys a company for what it did last year. They're buying it for what it's going to do next year. And so what we do is we focus on that strategy. Now, you're not going to invest unless it's got a great product, a great customer base, a great strategy for growing, and a management team that can produce the financial performance you're looking for. And so talking about management, what they've done in the past and what they plan to do in the future and why you think they're going to succeed in the future is critical. And then and only then can you close that investor presentation with people hopefully buying your stock or whatever. The third part is within each section of the presentation, you're going to have many images. And each image should have one and only one idea. And the reason for that is that way it's a crisp understanding of the point you're making. So you present your case. Now, at the same time you're presenting it, you want to figure out how do I present it well. So you want to make sure that you presented it by communicating your USP or unique sales proposition. In other words, what makes your point special? If you're Zappos and you're offering shoes to people online, everybody can offer shoes online. But if you're unique sales propositions, you can order as many different ones as you want, try them all on, send them back, and it's a risk-free opportunity to do that because Zappos picks up the shipping costs. That's your unique sales proposition. If you know you're in a sales setting, as many of the people that we've spoken to in today's presentation are, and they're knowing that their competitors are also going to be making presentations, what you want to do is something we call counterpunch. You want to keep into account what it is that the competitor might say and deal with those objections up front, and by doing that, inoculate them. I'm going to give you a simple example. Years ago, before we started Presentation Excellence, I ran a company called Brilliant Image. We had over 5,000 clients who used us to produce slides, overheads, and color prints for winning presentations. And we went 24/7 very early on in producing these slides because many people would tell us on a Friday that they're going to take the presentation to Japan or China or Europe, and they're going to leave Saturday or Sunday to get there, and therefore they needed it 24/7. Now, we had another company that was 5-6 times bigger than we were, and we knew competing with them was always going to be a challenge. Studying their business model, we discovered an interesting difference. We were open 24/7, so you could come at 2 in the morning, knock on the door, and she was there to open it and help serve you. If you contacted the other company, they had an answer service. They would then call their person, whoever it was, and that person might take an hour or so to get in. So we made a point of making it clear that we were open 24/7, whereas their concept was that they were available around the clock, and try to help the clients understand the difference between waiting that hour for the person to show up and having a person there and allowing you to go to sleep at 2 in the morning. And that was how we grew, and we were able to take a large segment of the investment banking industry. Related to the 1 point per slide, per slide concept, is the 1 point per chart. What many people try to do is combine pieces of information, and the problem with that is it might be easier to look at, but it's not easier to understand. So, well, the chart on the left gives you information about sales and profits. But the message that you would want to deliver, and that's the point of producing these slides, is so people can get the message, is to be able to say to people that it turns out over the last couple of years our sales have been going up, and they've slowed a little bit. But that's okay, because actually as we were growing sales in the early years, we were actually losing profits. And stabilizing profits was much more important. And we're now very happy to report that in future years, we're going to see both curves going up, greater sales and greater profits. The final key point that you want to understand is that when you do a slide presentation using numbers, make sure that you're not writing it from your perspective of the person who's conceptualizing what do these numbers mean, but from the audience's perspective, so it's customer-driven, as we refer to it. What is the message you want them to get? So it's not just the spreadsheet of sales. which is driven by the computer numbers, but overriding it, changing the axis, indicating that you have the best sales year ever, indicating that there's a 20% cumulative growth, average growth rate that's taking place, and that you're growing at a 20% clip, and that's the point. That it's not just that you had a great year, but you're growing and it's going to continue to grow, and that's what the customer wants to hear. So you need to override defaults, and we'll talk about that more often, so that the customer gets the information right away. And finally, always make sure you use titles that make a point. Keep in mind that most people don't have time to read everything anymore. So what they want to do is see one title that tells them exactly what the information is below, and then make the decision, do I want to go ahead and spend time reading it all or not? There are many different ways you can do a title, but always do it. So as I said before, don't talk, this is sales history. That's boring. No one's going to want to read it. It's 1010 was the best sales year ever. That's going to get my attention. If you follow our instructions, you can triple your income. That's going to get our attention. And so what you need to do when you produce a presentation is keep in point the mind of focus. Okay, you want to focus the entire presentation, each section, and each image. Now, in doing that, you don't want to put too much information on any of the slides. And so the second issue we want to drive home is that less is more. Now, there's an adage we all grew up with that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, the fact of the matter is nobody wants to read 1,000 words. The key is to be able to give someone a snapshot of what it is as a picture so that they get the message and they can move through it quickly. And so when you designing a presentation, keep in mind that you don't want to present your entire story by taking every single paragraph of your speech and put it on slides, or even the title sentence of each section. What you really want to do is figure out what the key point is of each one and just produce it in short, snappy phrases that are easy for you to be able to communicate. Now, this is a win-win-win situation. It takes less time to type this, less likelihood of an error taking place, and more likelihood that you can then focus in on whatever is important. So you might be dealing with a legal audience where testimony is important, or you might be a scientific audience where you can spend more time talking about statistics. So it's a win-win situation when you follow our advice of using just the key points and using it as a guide. Similarly, if you have numbers, don't just dump all your data into a spreadsheet and then produce a slide for me. Think through what it is you're trying to say. So here's an example. We're taking the numbers we just had. You could do two different things with it. If we were focusing, let's assume it's Macy's sales. What we could do is focus on the fact that every quarter, they have best quarters on the fourth quarter, which would make sense because it's a retail, and Christmas is in the fourth quarter. So if I looked at the first one, I would be able to say two things. One is, as you would expect, fourth quarter, we're doing very well. And we've actually had a phenomenal year in 2011 because you can see our fourth quarter sales were better. On the other hand, if I take all the numbers cumulatively, what I've got is bad news. I might be saying, you shouldn't be buying into Macy's as a stock because even if they had a great fourth quarter, overall their sales were so bad they actually had a losing year. Okay? So the key part that you want to do is communicate a message and have the chart focus on the message you're looking for. Similarly, don't throw all the data in a chart. Maybe it's an organizational chart. Maybe it's a product chart. No one's going to read all of this stuff. Break it down into meaningful pieces, such as this is the structure of our company and how we do it. It's structural over product, over geographic. And then the second part, within any geography, this is how we have our people reporting to one another. Make it readable. That's the key. And then finally, keep in mind the part that we always talk about. People don't buy for the features, really. They buy for the benefits, the advantages they get. So don't give me 37 features of Crichton 452 because nobody really cares about it. What they want to know about Crichton 457B is that it has benefits. It's better, faster, and cheaper for you. It'll make you a hero. So what you want to do is be able to show what's in it for me. That's the key. So now you've done that. You've focused your presentation. You know exactly what each element's going to be on, and you got rid of the clutter. And now you're ready to be able to start putting together a presentation. And here's our key point: leverage graphics and visual metaphors. You want a winning presentation, not just something that's boring. So you need to understand that you need to connect with the entire brain, both words and pictures. What you need to do is be able to use the pictures that highlight the words you're saying so that the right and the left brain are pulling it together, and therefore you become more persuasive because you're addressing both logic and emotions. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're someone who's in your 30s or 40s. You've been driving for maybe 10, 20, 30 years, never had an accident, very safe driver. But you happen to be a pharmaceutical salesman and you're on the road a lot. And what you do is you drive, and the company HR tells you, listen, next Thursday you need to go to a special program to learn about safe driving because the insurance company they work with is going to give a 10%, 15% discount to everybody for safe driving classes. So you don't have much choice. It's not up to you. You need to go, and you're going to do that. How receptive are you? Because you've been driving safely. I mean, what can they teach you? You've been driving all these years. Well, that's exactly the problem one of our clients had. This is where they had people coming in and falling asleep and being bored. So they called me in to take a look at it. And we took an analysis of what really could be taught and how it could be taught. They had just hired, in fact, ex-NASCAR drivers to do the presentation. So they could talk about really great things like how they won NASCAR races, which really doesn't help a whole lot of people when you're going up the turnpike or the expressway from one city to the other. So in analyzing the data, what we discovered is that there are many things in driving that people really aren't ready for figuring out in terms of what they're trying to do. For example, imagine you're driving and you're right next to a tractor trailer. Where do you position yourself? In front of it? Behind it? Next to it? Why would that matter? What would happen if the tractor trailer jackknifed? If you're in the wrong position, you might die. And so with concepts like that, which suddenly get you both logically and emotionally, gee, I really got to pay attention to this, we're able to keep people interested in learning about new things about safe driving that might affect them that they hadn't even thought about, and became a successful way for this company to grow and grow. The ability to use visuals is very important because it really does make so much of a difference. Audience recall is increased consistently by using good visual aids. Many years ago, 3M did a study at Wharton, and what they discovered in that study is that they had two groups, so the same presentation, one with, one without visual aids. The group that saw it with visual aids remembered 5 times more information than the other group, and if the goal is for recall, that's what you want. But what they also discovered is that the presenters were rated as being better prepared, more professional, more persuasive, and interesting. Why? I think there's 2 psychological reasons for that. The first is having thought through the presentation and figuring out what visuals to use leads the person to be able to know the material better and feel that the logic and emotion of how to present the information flows in a certain way, and that adds to that person's professionalism and credibility. And so that's one of the reasons. The second is from the audience point of view, the right and left brain constantly firing on the information and paying attention. So using good visual aids is a real win-win. How do you do it? Many different ways. One is you show the product. It's amazing how many times I'm in presentations where people really never show the product. Deal with concepts. I have companies that say, you know, we have 27 offices around the country, and they give a list. Nobody even cares what the name and what the locations of all of them are. What people want to know is you're on 6 continents and you're a global company. And so using a visual like this gets that information across because you can see it. In fact, if I redid this presentation on my own, as opposed to the one we did for this client, I would have the stars and I would have the dots, but I would leave out the names of the cities because the point is we have 27 offices on 6 continents, making us a quite global company. Sometimes you have to create your own stuff. So, for example, I have a client that for 6 years has been talking about going after a $1 billion market and focusing on how to do that by creating a circle within a circle within a circle. And every time they dealt with a different element, they would highlight a different segment of this. And while you and I as outsiders don't see it, the people internally understood the diagram as a communication tool. And that's the goal. Charts work the same way. Understand the difference in how to use statistics. If I'm dealing with comparisons of discrete information, such as Fund 1, 2, and 3, I use a bar chart. If I'm showing the trend, though, then I use a line chart. And if I'm talking about the unity and percentages within the unity, I'm using a pie chart. Now the key part again is don't let the computer drive you, you drive it. So for example, if we're a 30-year-old company and we've been around and we just recently in the last 3 years came to the East Coast, and we're really proud of the fact that today we have 15% of our business coming here after all those years, we can highlight that very nicely. But the one on the right allows you to focus on it and show how you're doing in the different states that you're in, whereas the one on the left, by just breaking it out that way, you'd never see the information. Again, it's not what you want to say just, it's also how the audience is going to understand the point. And the next part that's critical is you sometimes really have to be creative. You have to create images that make sense. So if you're in IT and you want to show that yours is sturdier, more durable than someone else's, and you remember that everything we learned in kindergarten is a true concept, then deal with that familiar concept. So on the left-hand side, you've shown what it's like, and you can, if you have their infrastructure, the big bad wolf, maybe a hacker, can huff and puff and blow it down. But if you have a solid infrastructure like we provide, that doesn't happen. You can use icons, don't drink and drive. You can use cartoons to help make a point. If you look at the one on the left, it's clear that she may be interested in having him take the garbage down. That's really not his issue. Okay? And on the right, it's the point about what we say and what our body language is delivers two different messages. And finally, sometimes you just have to really build your own thing because it's not there. We work with lots of companies who talk about themselves as software companies, especially being system integrated. What does system integrated mean? What it means is you put pieces together. But is that the way you really want it, or you want something more than that? Well, if you think about it, Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, created the first integrated human being. Okay? Think about it in terms of charts. All the pieces coming together, but not the way one would want it. What people really want is a unified, holistic sense of how to put it together. And that's the key. So now you know what you want to say, you've structured it for meaning, and you've made it visually important. What you now need to do is organize it for impact. Key concept. If the longer a presentation is, the more important this is. A 2-minute presentation doesn't require as much structure as a 10-minute, 20-minute, half-hour, hour presentation. Okay? So the rule of 3 is you give people a roadmap, telling them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell it to them, you fill in the details, and you summarize. Use transitions between sections because it gives everybody a chance to jump from section A to B, and gives you a chance to be able to figure out what you're trying to do. And then the third part is you want to conclude with takeaway points. You want to be able to finish with what you're trying to give them as takeaway, not interfering with what you're saying, because if you give them the points right away and as a handout, they'll read your handout instead of listening to you. So what you do is you give them the key points at the end, and then maybe you give them the handout on the information. So follow any system that organizes it the way you would want it to be. It might be an industry standard. You might find you want to build a case logically. For example, if I'm talking about sales, I first gain attention. I identify the needs. I show you how to satisfy them. I have the person really visualize so they're committed to it, and then I take action. There's a logic in every presentation, and you need to make sure that you're fitting that structure. And the transitions can take many different forms. You can do a transition, for example, that's just plain word slides, or things that are pictures. The best presentations, by the way, are just pictures. So many of the times I'll work with clients and literally try to do everything that way. And once in a while, you're going to find animation's a great feature because you want to build to a crescendo. You want to build to a key point, and that's what you want to communicate and get it across. If you're dealing with a sales presentation, as some of you are, as we saw from our poll before, 5 key things to keep in mind. It's not about you. It's about the client. So it has to be client-centered. You have to analyze the client's needs and explore the alternatives. You have to recommend for the client the value-added solution. In other words, don't take into account that the client is only going to hear what you say. What you want to do is demonstrate competence. So you analyze all the needs and you explore alternatives that aren't even things you're going to recommend and show why they're not good. But then your value-added solution is what you consider the absolute best one, and you explain it. And then you get them to understand it's not only the best answer, but you're the best possible partner for them. And now that they're committed to the best solution, they understand why it's better, that you're the best partner, you can then close by asking for a commitment. And now you're ready to actually deliver the presentation. And what I like about this slide as a way of kind of demonstrating the point is that much of what we do is not just us as a speaker, but actually we're a conductor. We're using the setting, we're using all of our tools, pulling it together to create a symphony. A beautiful, mellifluous sound and effect that we're trying to create rather than discrete pieces of information. If you read Presentation Excellence's newsletter that came out in March, we focused actually on panel presentations at conferences where so many times speakers do not become a symphony, but rather are cacophonious individuals presenting their own things. The look, the feel, the touch, and even the content, when they step on one another, is not working together in a positive way. So the goal is to deliver a winning presentation. So as an individual, what do you need to do? You need to know your material. You need to know your audience. What do they want to hear? A medical audience might want to hear something very different than a legal audience, for example. Check your visuals. Know your stuff. Use power language, okay? What I mean by that is powerful words. Elizabeth Loftus did a study in which she talks about a person who stands on a bridge and he's throwing rocks down and he hits a car. And she talks in the first case, she says the rock hits the car and it cracks the window. The guy's so upset by the sound and the motion, he has an accident. She then tells the same story again where the rock falls down and it smashes the windshield. That's the only difference between the two stories. But the decision by the jurors, so to speak, in this study was a difference of $10,000. And that's 25, 30 years ago. So it'd be a lot more in today's day and age. That's power talk, okay? So you're not just upset, you're really angry. Get it? Then what you need to do is whenever you're ready to present, rehearse, rehearse, and rehearse. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall, as we all know, and that's how you get to be the top of what you're doing. The key, remember, it's not about you. It's about being audience-driven. You want to take the words and the pictures, you want to engage your audience, and you want to make it exciting. You want to watch people's body language if you are doing a face-to-face presentation to make sure they're getting what you're saying. You watch how they're paying attention to you or they're looking down at their BlackBerries. And that's what you want to be able to deal with. Understand the context. A presentation at 8 o'clock in the morning, people are a little tired, but they're fresh, ready to go. Presentation right after lunch, people are tired from eating, or at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe they're bored from everything they've heard. You need to recognize the impact of the setting, both in terms of time, space, location. It makes a difference. And finally, keep in mind the following thing. We're talking about presentations, but all presentations really are, when they're great, are great conversations. And for those of you who are nervous, keep in mind you go to Thanksgiving dinner, you go to Christmas dinner, you've been having conversations all your life. And if you're doing them well, you'll do a great presentation well. Because what you'll do is you'll be able to converse. It's one-on-one. It's talking people to people. So master the process. Keep it simple. Keep it organized. Pace yourself. Be clear. When you're speaking, do something that helps you feel comfortable. So in my case, I keep water always available, or if it's in the afternoon, I keep coffee available. I don't sit comfortably. I have an actual pillow for my back, and I turn it around so it's uncomfortable when I'm speaking to you, so my energy keeps flowing as I speak to you. Always be clear, okay? Enunciate, vary your tempo and the force of what you're doing. Take the nervousness that you have and channel it into great energy, and always speak with a firm, clear voice. And remember, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So use tools to increase comprehension, whether it's a case study, a statistics, repeating the point. Think of Martin Luther King's speech, I have a dream. And he repeats it over and over again. It's his story, and he's trying to get people to buy into the ability to have a dream, to build on that dream, and to make a difference. Keep words simple. Most of us are in a professional industry, and what we do is we learn jargon. And jargon is a problem, and you need to be able to reduce that jargon to be able to make a difference. I'm very lucky. I'm both a lawyer and a psychologist. I spent gazillion years learning 2 sets of jargon, and I went to Capitol Hill right afterwards. From there, I learned the importance of just speaking English. Okay, so that's the key point. Keep it conversational and be precise in what you're saying. And finally, when you're ready to put it all together and you're practicing and you're rehearsing, visualize your audience. Stand up, talk, look maybe in a mirror, look at a picture. Visualize you speaking to people for that conversational feeling, and that'll allow you to pace your presentation so that you have a communication going. If you're prepared, you'll know how to handle any challenge. So if I've been in, as many of my clients have been, presentations where you think you had half an hour and something goes wrong because there's a fire drill and it's down to 15 minutes, you now know what your key points are, and instead of rushing through it all, you go through the key slides, and that's how you make the presentation work well. Now, some of you, as we've discussed in the beginning, aren't just doing face-to-face presentations anymore because you need to reach larger audiences, and it's so cost-effective to do that using webinar technology. It's a great technique for reaching prospects, for educating employees, to reach investors as a marketing tool, etc. Our position is that everything short of a sale, where you really need to understand what the other person wants, can be probably done just as well as a webinar as face-to-face. But if you have the choice and it's a big ticket item and you can do that sale over the face-to-face, getting that feedback is important to making sure that your trust and your confidence are coming across. Brian Tracy always says sales is the transfer of enthusiasm. You need to see that it's transferred. You can't necessarily do that in a webinar. Because remember, in a webinar, there's no face-to-face rapport. You can't impress them by dressing for success. You can't gesticulate. You have no eye contact, so you don't know if people are paying attention or falling asleep, whatever. So with all of those deficits, how do you do an effective webinar? It's real simple. You do everything that you need to do for a presentation better. You have to just be sharper. So you magnify your thoughts. You're really clear. It's well organized. You pace it. You use power language. You use visuals. You speak clearly. And what you can do is master the technology of your webcaster to be able to do other things. Like we did a poll in the beginning so that I would know what your concerns are. That allowed me to respond in some of the examples I've used today to the specific issues that you mentioned. Polling works for you. Annotation works for you, etc. And when you're doing webinar technology, keep in mind that you need to make sure you've taken into account equipment. Equipment may go down. It might be your computer goes down or a phone goes down. I always have a second computer in my office that's ready to grab so I can say to everybody, I'm sorry, we've lost you. Give me 3 minutes and I'll log on to the other computer, etc. It does happen from time to time. So what happens if you listen to me? If you've listened to me, you will become effective as a professional presenter in terms of both face-to-face and online communications. Why? Because as a pro, you are focused, organized, and you're using attractive visuals. You're using visuals that support what you say, not duplicate it. You're not reading the words. You're telling the story and letting the left and right brain look at the words and the pictures and get it. You're sharing with a person in a conversation how energetic you are about the ideas, how you believe in it, your confidence, and therefore you're powerful. And you used your setting in a way that makes sense. So if you're very far from the audience, maybe you get away from the stand, the podium, and you use a mic and you walk around and you walk in and out with your audience and you meet your audience. The key point to remember is this. You're telling a story and you have to enjoy it. And that's what you have to do. You have to enjoy your story. If you follow our advice, you'll be a hero. It's what gets me up early in the morning and work late at night with my clients. Whether you're a hedge fund, investment banker, educator, it doesn't matter. Whether you're in the United States or in another country, we work with them all. The goal is to make you a hero, because when you're a hero to your audience, that's the point of the presentation. And with that, I want to thank you so much for coming today and sharing our first in our series of 7 webinars that we're going to be doing for the next 7 Wednesdays, each one at 1:30 New York time. Today's topic obviously was on presentations, and if you want to know more about what we can do in leadership, strategy, business development, all areas that we not only train you for great presentations on through our training programs and our individual coaching programs, but also our consulting services that later on help you facilitate things like management advances, execution of strategy, etc., feel free to call. If you need a keynote speaker, obviously we're available to do that as well. Next week's webinar is going to be on harnessing the power of leader connections to advance your agenda. It's everything from building a strong alliance with another company, getting a merger or acquisition done, getting a job, building your career, networking, and connecting with other leaders. That will be our topic. If you haven't yet registered for that one, please do. If you want to register for any of the other 5 other webinars that we're going to do in the future, just go to www presentationexcellence.com, you'll see where you can click on webinars. There'll be registration for all 7 topics, addressing leadership, strategy, mentoring. We're covering lots of great material, how to present to boards, etc., all based on the feedback we've had from our 2010 series that we did when we did 15 different webinars. And with that, I want to thank you and wish you great presentations. Thank you.